Have you ever had that feeling, that nagging thought that you're just not enough, that you need something more? One more habit, one more spiritual secret to finally feel whole? Well, that's the exact question at the very heart of this ancient letter we're going to break down today, the book of Colossians.
I mean, just think about it. We live in a culture of plus. It's not just about getting the premium subscription or the director's cut. It's that constant pressure. From self-help gurus telling you to optimize your life, from biohackers promising to upgrade your body, from that endless scroll showing you a life that's just a little bit better than yours. It's this constant whisper that you need something extra to be complete. Well, believe it or not, 2,000 years ago, a small church was feeling that exact same pressure.
And to get their story, we gotta start right here. Picture it, Rome, around 62 AD. This isn't just any city, it's the center of the known world. It's this dazzling, chaotic hub of raw military power, of clashing philosophies, 1,000 different gods. I mean, emperors themselves were worshipped as deities. It is the absolute last place you would expect a world-changing idea to come from a prison cell.
And right there in that city, a man named Paul is under house arrest. Now, he's not some political revolutionary, not in the way we think of it. He's a prisoner of the Roman Empire for one single, totally radical reason, for saying that a crucified Jewish carpenter named Jesus is the true Lord of the world, over and above Caesar himself. So Paul's there, and he gets a visitor, a co-worker of his named Epaphras, and you have to imagine the journey Epaphras took. We're talking hundreds of miles over land and sea, a dangerous, exhausting trip, all to bring one urgent message. The church he started back in his tiny remote town of Colossae, a church Paul has never even seen with his own eyes, is in really serious trouble.
So what was this huge threat? Well, it wasn't a direct attack on Jesus. No, it was something way more subtle and honestly way more seductive. It was this philosophy of Jesus plus. It was pitched like Jesus was the perfect starting point, the entry-level package. But to really get spiritually mature, to unlock that next level, well, you were going to need something more.
And here's basically what they were selling. Let's look at this. They were offering Jesus plus secret knowledge, a kind of spiritual elitism, right? A secret handshake that gave you an edge. They were pushing Jesus plus mystical experiences, getting people to chase these spiritual highs as proof they were advancing. They demanded Jesus plus strict rules, dietary laws, festivals, really harsh self-discipline, stuff that gives you a false sense of being in control. And they even brought in Jesus plus angel worship, treating other spiritual beings like they were necessary middlemen. But for Paul, adding any of this stuff to Jesus wasn't an upgrade, it was a devastating subtraction.
And this is where we see Paul's genius. Look, he could have written this meticulous, point-by-point takedown of every single false idea, but he doesn't do that. He does something infinitely more powerful. He decides he's going to paint such a massive, cosmic, breathtaking picture of who Jesus actually is that by comparison, this other philosophy would just shrivel up and fade into its own insignificance. So this is it. This is the moment the whole letter has been building towards. Right at the heart of his argument in chapter 1, Paul just unleashes what scholars think was an early Christian hymn. This poem is his ultimate answer. It is a theological explosion designed to completely recalibrate their entire universe around the reality of Jesus.
He starts with the Greek word icon. Jesus, he says, is the image of the invisible God. Now, in their world, an icon was not a cheap copy. It was a perfect representation that carried the full weight and authority of the original. Think about Caesar's face on a Roman coin. That icon meant that coin held the full power of the entire empire. So Paul is saying Jesus isn't just like God, he is the perfect physical manifestation of God's very being and authority, right here on earth.
Then, he calls Jesus the prototokos, the firstborn over all creation. Now, this does not mean he was the first thing ever created. His audience would have gotten this instantly. In the ancient world, firstborn was a title of supreme rank, privilege, and inheritance. It's like us saying someone is first class or prime minister. Paul is declaring Jesus' status as the rightful ruler, the heir, and the sovereign Lord over every single thing that has ever been made.
And then comes the masterstroke. This is like a brilliant theological judo move. He uses the word pleroma, which means fullness. And this was almost certainly the exact buzzword the false teachers were using. They were selling this step-by-step program to achieve spiritual pleroma. So Paul takes their most powerful word, and he completely hijacks it. And here it is, the theological mic drop.
Paul basically says, oh, you're seeking fullness? Let me tell you about fullness. He says, the entire, undiluted, complete pleroma of God wasn't achieved through rituals or secrets. It was pleased to take up permanent bodily residence in one person, Jesus Christ. The very thing they were striving for was already and completely present in the one they started with.
Okay, so now that Paul has established the absolute uncontested supremacy of Christ, now he can circle back and deal with those false teachings head on. And he shows why all those Jesus plus add-ons are not just unnecessary, they are completely powerless.
So a key part of this false teaching was fear. They tried to control people by warning them about the stoicheia tokosmou, the elemental spiritual forces of the world. These were these mysterious cosmic powers or principles they claimed held people in bondage. They were basically making the Colossians feel like they were constantly in danger of being enslaved. So what's Paul's answer to all this fear-mongering?
Well, Paul's response is just a declaration of total victory. It's like a Roman general coming back from war, parading his defeated, shamed, and powerless enemies through the city streets for everyone to see. That, Paul says, is exactly what Christ did on the cross to every single power and authority that would ever try to enslave us. The spiritual battle the Colossians were so terrified of losing, it was already won.
And this part right here is so crucial, because this isn't just some abstract theology for a test. Understanding who Jesus is, it fundamentally changes who you are. This all-powerful cosmic king doesn't just pardon you, he actually remakes you. He is creating an entirely new kind of humanity.
Paul says that your old identity, the one defined by self-serving desires, by words that tear people down, and by all those ethnic, religious, and social divisions that just fracture our world, that person, he says, metaphorically died with Christ. Just think about the times you've been driven by those old patterns. Paul is saying that's the old you. That's a past reality.
And in its place is a new humanity, raised to new life, one that is defined by the very character of Jesus himself, compassion, kindness, humility, and this radical love that forges unity. But here's the amazing part. This is not a to-do list you have to achieve. It's a to-be list. It's a description of who you already are in Christ. The challenge isn't to become this person. It's to learn to live out the truth of who you've already become.
And Paul brings this huge cosmic reality down to the most practical, nitty-gritty level. He shows how this new identity has to transform the most basic, rigid social structure in the whole Roman world, the household. See, in that world, the male head of the household, the pater familias, held absolute life-for-death power over his wife, his children, and his slaves. But Paul is about to turn that entire system on its head.
But wait, Paul isn't finished. He is about to put his entire theology on the line. He's not just sending a letter. He's sending a living, breathing exam to see if the Colossians really understood a single word he just wrote.
The guy carrying the letter is named Tychicus, but he's not coming alone. With him is a man named Onesimus, and from another one of Paul's letters, we get the shocking backstory. Onesimus is a slave who ran away from his master, a guy named Philemon, who just happens to be a Christian leader in the Colossian church. Now, under Roman law, Onesimus wasn't a person. He was property. As a fugitive, he could be branded, beaten, or even crucified. He was literally risking his life by going back.
And then comes the stunning climax of the entire letter. Paul commands the church, the entire church, to welcome this fugitive slave, not as property being returned, but as a faithful and beloved brother. This was so much more than a personal request. It was a direct challenge to the entire social order of the Roman Empire. Paul was showing, in real time, that in the family of God, our allegiance to Christ redefines and just overrides every other status. There are no slaves and masters. There are only brothers and sisters.
So let's bring it all home. That struggle in ancient Colossae, that constant, nagging pressure to add more, do more, and perform spiritually, it's the exact same pressure we face from our modern culture of self-optimization. The names have changed, for sure, but the lie is identical. You are not enough as you are.
But Paul gives us one final, liberating word from chapter 2. He tells the Colossians that in Christ you have been given fullness. Pleroma noi. Now, the grammar here is everything. It's what's called a perfect passive participle. All that means is it's a completed action done to you by God with results that continue on forever. Fullness is not a goal you're striving to achieve. It is a status you have already received.
And that, right there, is the core message of the entire book of Colossians. Your spiritual life isn't about climbing some ladder toward a fullness you don't have. It's about learning to walk on the firm foundation of a fullness that has already been given to you as a gift in Jesus. You don't work for completeness, you live from it.
And that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. In a world that will never stop telling you to upgrade, to hustle, to become more, what would change in your life right now if you could truly, deeply rest in the belief that because of Jesus Christ, you are already completely and eternally enough? The good news of Colossians is that you can stop striving. You can rest. You can live from a place of fullness, not for it.